Welcome to the do's and don'ts of a GuideStar profile, maximizing your fundraising potential. So I want to briefly introduce Candid, if this is your first time interacting with us, what we do. Every year, millions of nonprofits spend trillions of dollars around the world. Candid finds out where that money comes from, where it goes, and why it matters. And through research, collaboration, and training, Candid connects people who want to change the world, people like you, to the resources that they need to do it, one of those resources being your GuideStar profile. So without further ado, I want to start handing over the reins to our lead presenter, Eva Nico. And I also want to highlight we have Dorothy and Kristen behind the scenes answering many of your questions along the way. And all three of these folks are amazing people who know so much about our products here at Candid, including GuideStar. So happy to have them here.
Well, very glad to be with you all today. As Chris mentioned, my name is Eva Nico, and I am Senior Director of Programs at Candid. And today I will be helping you think about the do's and don'ts of your profile on GuideStar. So let's get into it. First of all, we try to make an impact with everything that we do. And so what I hope to help you do today is to part the veil a little bit and see what are some of the best practices for the way that you can represent your organization's work on GuideStar, and what are some of the don'ts or mistakes to avoid. We will be just very briefly talking about the seals of transparency and delving straight into it section by section, the do's and don'ts of your bronze seal, silver, gold, and platinum seal, and then we'll share some next steps and some additional resources that are available to you for joining us today. So first, just a quick word about how fundraising and seals of transparency connect. We know that a nonprofit's accomplishments are a very important signal that donors use to decide if a charity is trustworthy, followed by other signals like third-party evaluations, name recognition, financial information. Financial ratios are declining in importance, but are still a factor, particularly in donor decisions. We also know that nonprofits can lose trust. So, for example, highlighting greed and high compensation, having a negative reputation, having a lack of honesty and transparency. Transparency is not just a high-level concept. It can be tangibly demonstrated through a seal of transparency on GuideStar. And we recognize organizations for sharing the kind of information that donors need with 4 different seal levels. The bronze, which is a very basic set of information so that literally donors can find you. The silver, which is information about your programs and your brand so they can get to know you and see what you do. The gold goes deeper and talks about some of the financials and information about your people. And then finally, the platinum seal recognizes organizations for sharing more information about their strategy and how you think about your progress and results. So your GuideStar profile with a seal gives donors the information they need. And we know that it matters. So research has shown research by 2 independent professors, Harris and Neely, has shown that a seal of transparency earned 1 year, organizations that have a seal tend to have more contributions a year later. Now, I want to say a word about this 53% statistic. You know, this is not me promising that next year after earning a seal, you will get 53% more in contributions. That's just not how the statistics or how the research works. It essentially, what it says is that there was a meaningful difference in contributions to organizations having a seal versus not, on average, across thousands of nonprofits. So again, please don't call me next year if you don't get your 53% more in contributions, but do hear that donors when giving, funders when giving, do care about kind of a concrete demonstration of transparency. And they obviously care not only that you demonstrate transparency, but also what you actually share. So let's talk a little bit very quickly about how to get in and make sure that you can actually update your profile and contribute the information, make it really represent your organization's work. So there are essentially 3 steps. You as an individual needs to become associated with the profile. So they need to claim their organization's profile. And what that's about is making sure that the right person representing the organization can modify the right profile. So we don't want someone else to be messing with the information. We want the representatives of the nonprofit to update the profile. Obviously, the next step is to actually make those updates, and we will be talking in a lot more detail about what that looks like. And then finally, there's a step to publish. So there's an experience I'll show you where you can make your update, and then when you press publish, that's what makes the information flow onto the public profile. That's what makes the information you share kind of officially out there. So a few do's and don'ts for actually claiming your profile. So the first do I'll recommend is to make sure that you use your work email address if you have one. So for example, I'm Eva Nico, so my email address is eva.nico@candid.org, and that's what I would use to claim Candid's profile. This essentially speeds up our ability to approve you as a profile manager. So if you want this to happen fast and you have a work email address, that's what I urge you to do. If you don't have a work address and you have a Gmail or other kind of address, no problem. You can still claim your profile, but it will take a little bit more time and it will take a few more steps. We also, and those steps include sharing some additional documentation. So my next to do for all of you is that when you're claiming your profile, please provide the IRS EIN issuance letter or IRS letter of affirmation. And I'll show you what they look like on the next screen. But what we're not looking for, and is a don't, is a letter of determination. And I know they all sound the same. It's just, a bunch of words with IRS in it. So I'll show you the visuals for them, but they're different documents. And the reason that we can't accept a letter of determination is because it is already a public document that anyone can go to the IRS website and download. So it does not represent sort of sufficient proof, sufficient validation. And then finally, one more do that I'll share with this quick step is that more than one person from an organization can be a profile manager. And you can add your colleagues if you have them in order to help you with this process. And once one person becomes approved, it is easy to add additional folks. So that's what I'll share there. And then let's talk a little bit about those 2 documents I mentioned. So these are just examples, the IRS EIN issuance letter or IRS letter of affirmation. These are specific documents that the IRS sends your organization when they issue an EIN or when they affirm your status, and they are not broadly publicly available, unlike a letter of determination, which again can just be downloaded from the IRS website. So you will all have this presentation after this webinar and can kind of take a look at the details of those documents, but I'll highlight that confusion that sometimes can happen. So let's, without further ado, delve into some of the do's and don'ts, particularly of earning a bronze seal of transparency. I mentioned that bronze is basic information. So there are not a lot of do's and don'ts here. It's pretty simple, straightforward information. So it's contact information for your organization. It's information about where donations should be sent to in terms of address, information about your mission, and information, just basic information about your leader. So in terms of the do's and don'ts, I'll show you a little bit more, but the basic do's are There, in your mission statement, you will be asked to also add some additional tagging to your mission in terms of identifying your subject area and population served. So there's an easy and a hard way to do that, and I'll try to show you next what that looks like. Then we do want you to add those tags, because I mentioned that the point of bronze was to essentially help donors find you, help people find you. And so this additional tagging using the philanthropy classification system, which is kind of an expanded version of the NTEE system, that's one of the ways that donors can quickly help identify your organization for the work that you do. And then finally, I will recommend that you lead with a brief, compelling mission statement. We have seen some mission statements that organizations have shared that are very long and very difficult to absorb. And the reason to share a short one is because your mission statement not only shows up on your GuideStar profile, but is often shared with other platforms like Amazon Smile or like Facebook, where it also appears there. And it really makes sense, given that many people view this information on mobile or view this information in these other experiences, that it be a brief, compelling mission statement. So I talk a little bit about the idea of not only telling you, but showing you. So I will try to navigate to this screen, which essentially, when you come to GuideStar, if you just Google us, Google GuideStar, you'll probably come to our homepage, and you might navigate to this Update Nonprofit Profile page, which is essentially a great starting point when you're claiming a profile. Now, for those of you who already have registered and have claimed, what I urge you to do is first sign in with your account on GuideStar. And I'm going to do that myself because I have an account on GuideStar as well. And then what you'll notice is that when you actually go to your Update Nonprofit Profile page, once you're signed in and have been approved as a manager, it changes. It shows you the organizations that you are already approved to manage. So in my case, there's a few organizations that I can modify, and that includes Candid. So I'm going to go into this bronze level and just quickly show you the update view for bronze, and in practice, show you what I talked about in terms of the philanthropy classification system code step. So you'll see here I am in Candid's kind of updating experience. And it says, gives me some summary information. For example, tells me that Candid is 2021 Platinum. It also gives me here an opportunity to understand that this information gets shared beyond your GuideStar profile with our partners. And I mentioned that easy step to add assigning additional profile managers. So as an existing manager, I can go in and do that as well on my screen using this button. When I go into update, what I see is an overview of the seals of transparency and additional optional information that I can share about my organization. And I can see, what I've done. So it gives me a little check mark if I've completed the section, if I've completed enough information. And I talked to you about the mission statement. So when I click on mission, here's where I have an opportunity to add Candid's mission statement. In our case, it's a very brief one sentence. Candid gets you the information you need to do good. And then I mentioned this idea of being found for the work that we do. And this is done using these two tags here. So what subject area best describe the organization? What are target populations that we serve? And what I'll just want to highlight to you is that there are two ways to pick these tags. You can either explore the menu that is here. So if you're an educational organization, you might click education and see that there are subcategories here in terms of that. Or you can also try to type in information. So let's say my organization is concerned with, you know, is a museum. So I am typing museums, and the menu kind of responds to what I type here. So if you're having trouble finding the term that you need to reflect your organization, I would just urge you to try typing a few potential terms in there. So that's just, again, kind of a live demonstration of what happens when you go in to update your profile. Let's shift for a minute to the silver section. So in there, what we're asking about is information about your programs and a little bit of information to help you represent your organization, your brand across platforms. So we're asking for a logo, a tagline, a website address, and social media handles. And in terms of the program's information, the do's are to keep your information short, again, because it's a web page. People are going to be looking at this and scanning it fairly quickly. So you want to have sort of short, punchy information. We urge you to think about the geographic area that you serve and identify that. And if your area is pretty broad, like the United States, you can specify that, but you can also specify that down to a city if you're a local organization focused on local work. And then we urge you to actually share your tagline and logo. Again, this is not just for the GuideStar profile, but because then it helps represent your organization on all our partner sites. And they often look for the logo and tagline as a way to show organizations. So those are some of the do's, and obviously there are some corresponding don'ts to that as well. Let's talk a little bit about the gold section and the do's and don'ts, and then I'll show you an example of an actual profile that applies these in practice. So for gold, we're talking about financial and people information. And specifically, gold, there are a couple of ways to fulfill the requirements for a gold seal of transparency. In terms of financials, if you're a larger organization, $1 million in budget or above, we do urge you to share your audited financial statement from your most recent fiscal year. If you're a newer, younger organization or a smaller organization, you can actually self-report some of those financial fields. You don't need an audited financial statement. But for a larger organization, it really helps your credibility to have an audited financial statement. So there are two ways to participate here for both smaller and larger organizations. And then obviously, we're looking, this whole process is about growing trust in your organization. So we do urge you to, well, provide truthful information rather than misrepresenting your organization. And then the gold section asks a few basic questions about the names of your board chair and who your board members are. And it also asks you for demographic information about who works at your nonprofit. And specifically, it asks you for demographic information about the leader of your organization. And then there are some optional sections you can participate in to share information about your board and your staff and your senior staff. But in terms of the do's and don'ts of these sections, you know, this is important. So number one, please ask for demographic info, don't guess. So with your leader, that can be a conversation, let them know about the profile and what will be shared. But for your board and staff, typically this involves a short survey to ask them these questions in order to collect this respectfully. Number two, if you're just starting out and you don't have demographic information about your staff or your board, we do urge you to start with your leader and then work towards collecting with staff and board. And there will be a guide that we'll share in order to help you do that. And then this is an invitation to participate. No one's being forced to do this. And if your board and staff members do not want to share this information about themselves, please do include the decline to state option. And when you report this information on GuideStar, we include an option for the people who have declined to state or who have not answered the survey or the questions in order to allow you to reflect that. And then finally, we do ask you to refresh this information annually if you can, so that it is up to date as board and staff change. So I mentioned that there is a demographic, there's a guide that we offer for how to collect and share DEI data. And so I think at the moment, my colleague Chris will drop in a link into the handouts section and share that with you, but it is available publicly and will be also shared with you after this webinar. But there's a guide that basically gives you the introductory text to the survey, gives you the actual questions that you'll want to ask and how you ask them, as well as the menu of options to provide, including that important decline to state option as well. I'll briefly talk about Platinum. So Platinum is our highest seal of transparency and recognizes organizations for sharing strategy and metrics. And there, for strategy, again, there are two ways to participate. We're trying to make this easy for you. So if your organization already has a recent strategic plan that covers the current year or maybe even the upcoming couple of years, you can upload that document. Otherwise, there are essentially two questions that you can answer that help people understand your organization's goals and strategies. And you can use those questions as a guide for a discussion with your board and staff if you don't have a strategic plan already. And then this is maybe a refrain at this point, but I do ask that you keep the information short and really show rather than tell. There is a lot of space to provide the answers to these questions, but I think a couple of paragraphs, a brief paragraph, does more benefit for your organization in terms of people being able to absorb that information. And then for Platinum, I'll say that we are asking about measures of progress and results. And this can be intimidating for organizations. But what the do is to really start by sharing the metrics you already collect. This is not a gotcha section that we're expecting something that you don't have. It really is asking you to share how you as an organization think about your progress and results and to share what you're already measuring on that front. There is a common results catalog that we provide of metrics that we have found in research and we have found being shared by organizations out there, but there's also an opportunity to enter a custom metric if you're not finding your organization's metric in the common results catalog. So you have kind of multiple options to participate there. And then when you provide a metric, you'll be able to share a little bit more about it. So I'll show you a few of the ways that this can go a little bit wrong, to be honest. So I'll show you maybe the don't view next, which is this is an organization that appears to be sharing 6 different metrics. But the fact is, when you look at the detail of this, you see that they've essentially, entered 6 custom metrics that all reflect the same quantities. So it's just essentially 6 different ways of framing the same result. So they're talking about number of animal adoptions, number of animals with freedom from hunger and thirst, number of animals with freedom from pain. Those are just 6 different ways of framing the same result. I could see there being maybe 2 ways to talk about that, but 6 different ways feels like it's not really what helps a donor or someone understand the organization. And then the second mistake that I see on profiles is when someone has a very big sounding lofty mission. So for example, in this case, to provide the highest quality person-directed services and support people with disabilities and mental illness so they flourish. But then when you look at it, the metric that they share really doesn't connect with their mission at all. It's the number of program sites that they have. So that's a don't in my view, that as much as possible, you're trying, you don't have to have exact proof of everything that you're doing, but you should connect the metrics that you share with your organization's program and mission. So I will next talk a little bit about this idea of, showing you a profile that applies the do's that I've talked about so far. So this is Tubman, an organization focused on safety, hope, healing. They have a platinum seal of transparency. And just very quickly, you can see, number one, they've shared a mission, and it's a brief, punchy kind of mission statement. And then it makes me curious, like, what does it mean to advance opportunities for change? So I next go down the profile and I see that really they are talking about work they do in the Twin Cities area, and that they aim to solve, issues around violence, exploitation, mental illness, and addiction, and that those issues are tangled with homelessness and poverty. So they talk about some of the ways that they try to address those issues with the programs that they have. For example, a family violence emergency center and legal services. And you will notice again, really showing rather than telling. We provide 130 beds of emergency shelter for victims of domestic violence. So they're not just telling me, but showing me, what it is that they do. Again, with their metrics, they're doing the right things here. They're talking about the number of clients served. They're talking about number of volunteers that they have. They're talking about crisis hotline calls answered. These all connect to the mission that they've shared. And then within the strategy questions, the gold questions, you can see that they share kind of a brief description of what they're hoping to accomplish, as well as the work and the strategies that they're using to do that. And then finally, we talked a little bit about the demographic information. As you can tell, there's a lot of information on the profile, their financials and so on. But in terms of demographic information, they've essentially talk about both who their leader is from a leadership perspective, which just gets described here, and they've also shared information about their board and staff and senior staff here. So they've reported some of those metrics as well. So I hope that this has been helpful. We've shown sort of a successful profile here. I'll pretty much finalize here with this idea that after you update your profile, you want to make sure that you publish the information that you've updated. You will see that as step 2 in the experience that I showed you, just making sure that it actually gets published and is reflected on your profile. It takes about 15 minutes for updates to become live on profiles. So that's how long that might take. And then I'll finalize with just some additional resources that we hope to share with you. So there is a GuideStar Profile Best Practices Guide that you will have access to. It's a link that we'll provide during the course of this webinar. And we also are providing a transparency seal data collection document. So what we have heard is, sometimes it takes a little time to assemble some of the information before it can be shown on the profile. And so we provide an Excel document that helps you collaborate with your colleagues on collecting this information and making sure it's in one place before you do the update. So you will have access to those resources for joining us today. And then once you do achieve a seal, we just encourage you to share and celebrate. There's an outreach toolkit we provide with the images and some sample tweets or sample Facebook posts that you can use. And we just urge you to celebrate your accomplishment. And then I will also invite for a moment members of our Candid support team, just to show you that if you do need more help beyond what we've talked about today, there are real people at helping support you all. So I'll just invite Erin and Madeline to pop in for a second if you can. Oh, there we go. Sorry, I wasn't seeing you on camera. Hi, Erin. Hi, Madeline. These are just two folks on our support team that both help with the claim flow. So if you're coming in to become approved as a manager, or if people come in and just ask us questions. And so we are here for you, beyond this brief half hour we've had together. And you're able to just email us at support@candid.org. Specifically, if you email us right after this webinar, you say that wasn't clear to me, or I need to know something more, please put Candid Webinar in your email in the subject line, and we will be right on it. We will try to help you right away after this session as well. That's it for us. I hope that this was helpful to you all. I really thank my colleagues, Chris, Dorothy, Kristen, Madeline, and Erin for joining today and for hopefully helping to facilitate some questions on the back end you may have submitted. This was a very short and sweet presentation, so I think that's about all the time that we have for today, and I'll hand it over to Chris.
Thank you so much, Eva. Yeah, so we just want to leave you today letting you know that we are available for you to continue to learn with us, and we have two next steps. One is a self-paced e-learning course bundle that is currently discounted to help you plan for year-end fundraising success and impact. So these are two courses: how to cultivate meaningful relationships with funders, and also how to start measuring your organization's impact. So we spoke today about how to communicate that impact. If you're wondering how to measure it, that can be a great course for you. And also, one of our most popular workshops series is a 3-week-long proposal writing bootcamp. And the next one starts on October 19th. And we do have a discount on that running through October 11th. So also wanted to highlight that to you for anyone who is currently writing a grant proposal or thinking about it. And then last but not least, we would welcome staying in touch with you via our Candid Learning newsletter. And so we've got the QR code on screen so that you can keep up with all of the great trainings that we have on offer, including, I'm sure, future webinars with Eva.